Okay, welcome. My name is Jan Sowa. I'm a sociologist, but I also work a little bit with art, so I have an honor and pleasure to hold this conversation with Jeremy Dellerem. I will very briefly introduce our guests.
You can do it in Polish if you want.
No, I think let's keep let's do it all in English. So Jeremy Dellerem was born in 1966 in London. He's definitely one of the best known and the most recognized contemporary British artists. He exhibited in Venice Biennale, many important institutions around the world, Palais de Tokyo, Tate Modern. He also received Turner Prize. And what I think is interesting and important in the context of this exhibition is that Jeremy often works in collaboration, trying to somehow dilute authorship. Often works outside of the gallery, not in the white cube, right? So we're presenting here some stuff in the white cube. However, all this and many other works by Jeremy Dellerem are made outside of the gallery space. And also what I think is very interesting, and I would like to get to this later on, it often involves people from outside of the art world, right? Not contemporary art professionals, but people who are creative, but in a sort of different context or different places. So to start this talk, on the Tate website, there's a small note about this project, where you say that you were very eager to do it, very willing. You didn't believe it was possible, it would happen, as it was a complicated project. But you express your motivation and the importance of the project to you. Can you tell us a little bit why? Because, well, obviously, in the history of trade unions or class struggle, this is an important event. But the way I understood this note is that you have a more personal relationship to this issue. So if you could tell us something about why such a focus on this event.
I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me in the back? Just put your hand up if you can hear me. There we go. I hope you can hear me as well. So the question was about the why I did this. I'll tell you why. Because in the 80s, I lived basically through television as a young person. I watched TV a lot, and the miners' strike in '84 was a huge moment in British history and a real clash of cultures, but also class and industrial culture and a post-industrial culture. And a political clash, and it was something that as a young person, it was very clear something was very big was happening in the country, and it was. I lived in the south of England, and all the action was in the north, really. But I remember seeing on the news the clash between the miners and the police at this event, that became called the Battle of Orgreave, and it was with thousands, maybe 20,000 people, and it was a massive. It was on TV. And the miners were massively defeated, very publicly defeated. And it looked like something from a medieval battle, because there were horses and dogs, and they were being pursued by a very well-organised police. So it was like something from ancient history almost. And so for me, it was a very, the visuals of it are very, very strong. And it's something that I was always thinking about from that day. And then I thought maybe one day I could make something about this, learn more about it. And so I had this idea to remake it, recreate it in live for an audience, which of course is a ridiculous, stupid idea, but it was something that I wanted to do, this absurd idea. Mm-hmm. It's almost like something from Monty Python or something. Mm-hmm.
At the time it happened in '84, you were not even 20. Do you remember having a political worldview that allowed you to grasp what was happening? Or was it just this spectacular nature, like a monumental thing happening that marked you so much?
It's a good question. I think I was not very political, really, but this one event made me realise that something very bad was happening in the country. I feel like people from the same country, like a civil war almost, fighting each other on this scale, because it was epic. Mm-hmm. It was really an epic battle, And it really upset me, I think, and it just looked wrong. It just looked totally wrong, like this should not be happening in this country. And so that really, maybe that was the beginning of some kind of political journey or thought. It was a terrible time in Britain anyway. It was the middle of Margaret Thatcher's reign.
Yeah, that was also what I wanted to ask you. How do you remember the 80s? Because in Poland, for us, the 80s, definitely that was the worst decade after the war from many points of view. But you know, not everywhere. In Yugoslavia, the 80s was one of the best decades. So it differs very much in Europe. This is a time where different places experience different things. How do you remember living through the 80s?
I hated it, but maybe it's because I was like the age. I was a teenager. So I just hated being a teenager, probably. But I hated Margaret Thatcher very quickly during the miners' strike, and then she stayed on for another 6 years.
Yeah.
So the whole of my, she was Prime Minister for 11 years. So for the whole of my teenage years, she was Prime Minister, I think, more or less. She was Prime Minister, so she infected the whole of my adolescence, her presence, and also the men around her. There was always men around her. These horrible people. Yeah. And so it was just this backdrop, really, of this really nasty group of people, I felt.
Working in this, regarding Margaret Thatcher, because I think maybe we'll not come back to this issue later on. Did you go to Trafalgar Square when the witch was dead to celebrate?
I didn't know. It's funny. This is the day she died. There were celebrations around Britain. I was in a prison in Wales because I had to, and I was on a funeral. That's a funeral. Where was I? I was in a prison one day doing some work with some prisoners. And they were all very happy as well. But there were some spontaneous folk events, and in the coal mining areas, they had they made figures of her in coffins and burnt them. I mean, it was brilliant folk art, basically. But she had a state funeral, which is, you only give to absolutely the top people, like Winston Churchill and the Queen and people like that. She got a state funeral, and she wanted one. She wanted a state funeral. Yeah. Which was very, very divisive, because half the country hated her and the other half sort of loved her, kind of. She's a very divisive figure. A bit like Trump is a divisive figure. You really couldn't be in the middle about this person. And so I didn't go to a party, but in a way, she was dead, but she had been powerless for 10 years. She'd never made an appearance. She had Alzheimer's, so it was not the same person that died. That year in 1984 in October, the IRA nearly blew her up in a bomb in a hotel she was staying at for her party conference, and they killed people, nearly killed her cabinet, members of her cabinet, and nearly killed her. Someone had gone in 3 weeks before and done some work as a plumber, and had planted a big bomb in the hotel and nearly killed her. So she was hugely unpopular with a lot of people.
I assume working on this project must have been very, very complicated from an organizational point of view, because obviously it's a huge thing to do. But what interests me more is your concerts with ethical issues regarding putting people through, because this is not actually, it's not a typical reconstruction. Not because it's a work of art, but also if it happened not as a work of art, it would not be a typical reconstruction. Because you have people who are involved in the original event, who repeat their experience. It was extremely traumatic. It was probably one of the worst moments of their lives, obviously. Yeah. So how did you tackle this question? Was there any problematic moment where those people, because it's a sort of it's a traumatic encounter again with something that was extremely harmful to you. So
it's a big thing to ask these men to return to the site of a defeat, and then remake the defeat again for themselves. So, but I think, to be honest, I think the men who took part, I had big meetings in rooms with people there's this many people or more, and I had to face these former miners and explain what I was doing. And I told them why I was doing it and what I thought was important about it, and they agreed, basically. I was just very honest with them about what I was trying to do. And they understood it. They understood why I was trying to make this performance again, this reenact this terrible moment, just to show the public again what had happened, and unearth, take up, dig up this memory, basically. Because when I did it, it was in 2001. New Labour was huge, and so there was really no interest in the miners' strike in terms of the national conversation, political conversation. It was kind of embarrassing because it was not cool, and it was a defeat, and it was complicated to talk about it. So I just felt, let's talk about this thing by making this big public event with thousands of people. You can't ignore it now. So and they understood that. It's time to go back and just do a public inquiry, I call it. Often, and I've explained this many times, often when there's a crime is committed in Britain, and like a child is abducted or a murder, and the police have trouble working out who did this, they will reconstruct the crime or parts of the crime for the public.
For the public, okay.
Yeah,
they do it in Poland, but it's a closed...
Yes, and they show it on TV and stuff, so the public can not to memory.
Okay, so we have it.
So I was basically reconstructing a crime scene.
Yeah.
And they understood that idea. It's a crime. The crimes committed that day, very violent crimes, but also as a crime against the class and against a kind of culture.
And these crimes were not really persecuted, and people responsible were not really punished. No, afterwards they actually made a trial against the miners, who were acquitted later on. But people who did this never faced justice.
No, at the moment there's an ongoing campaign to get a public inquiry into this event in 1984. Miners were arrested at the site. And then they went to trial. They had very serious charges, which could have been 10 years in prison for riot. These are very old-fashioned charges. But what they realised was that the police had all written the same things at the same time in their books about what happened. And also the police had kept a record on film of what was happening, and it contradicted their writings. So the police actually destroyed their own case, which was good. But 3 years later, at Hillsborough, where 93 people were crushed in a football match, the police did the same thing. They all made up the evidence, all wrote at the same time the same things. And that time they got prosecuted, and some will go to prison after 30 years almost. So it was a common practice with the police, a kind of corrupt practice to collude in terms of the evidence that they were given. They were told what to write by a senior policeman.
Yeah, well, even the event itself, it was in a way staged or prepared for, because there's, well, you would know better than me, there was this document called Ripley Report that prepared certain measures for policing miners and other strikes, and it looked like they were sort of maybe not happy about this confrontation, but they were prepared to do it and to manage it in a certain way before it happened, right? BBC passed this horrible material the very same day, showing the events in reverse, right? So they show, because of course miners started defending themselves after they were attacked, throwing stones and stuff at the police. What BBC showed was it happened the other way. The first they threw the stones and then police attacked, right? But what you're saying about this, all things being prepared, even what they were supposed to write down, so it looks like it was a sort of perverse happening or performance that was prepared by the government.
Well, the government, in 1979, before they were the government, a report was written about how to take on the unions. And one thing was to train a police force up, amongst other things. And the style of policing you see here is called, it's basically policing that had been used in Northern Ireland. And it was called colonial policing, which tells you something. And it's a more violent form of crowd control, more proactive. You don't just take the punishment, you actually go out and you find people and you train people, especially very fit men, to be like your kind of elite police. So this style of policing finally came to England, really. And it actually got worse after this event. It got worse when there's like occupations of villages and towns. Well, villages were occupied by the police and surrounded, and roadblocks. And it became very, very, very violent. And a lot of the things were happening at night as well. So you can't. There's not much documentation because it was getting later in the year.
Sure.
So like people getting very badly beaten at night in the darkness. And so this was a summer's day.
Yeah.
So yes, so it was, they were prepared.
Yeah. Given all that, I find it extremely puzzling that you had, well, of course, miners, but you also had ex-police.
We had a few ex-police take part. I mean, we had a lot of reenactors.
Yeah.
So this whole reenactment scene, you can see just that on that camp there. That's the reenactment scene in Britain is really big. That's not a typical example, really, but you'll see on that film. And you know what, you must have it in Poland.
Of course.
People dress up as medieval knights and go around. In Britain we have it from like Roman times to the Second World War. So we have like 2,000 years of military history or more. And it's a really big thing in Britain. It's massive. And so I was very interested in these people that do this, about their view of history and what they think history is, and the politics of the battles they fight. And on the whole, they're quite conservative people. They're quite Brexit, I would say, if that's the right term. A lot of them. They're quite right-wing, because they like uniforms and guns and jumping about and shouting. So, you know, they're a certain kind of person. And I wanted to work with people like this and make them confront men who had been part of a campaign and were still alive. Because if you do the Napoleonic Wars or First World War, you'll never meet anyone that's still alive from those wars now. And here you are fighting, or you're with men who were part of the campaign. So that's very important. So kind of history, you know, they actually see history in human beings.
And this ex-policeman, was there any confrontation? Any because that was a sort of like, you know, for the miners meeting those people who were beating them up with sticks 30 years ago and 25 years ago.
Well, you know, that miner was very interesting. I mean, there's a guy in the film who is a former miner. He was a miner, he was in the army in Northern Ireland, then he was a policeman, and then he was a policeman after the miners' strike at Hillsborough, where 93 people were crushed to death. So he has this horrible experience of British history, basically. And he was nervous around the miners. He thought they might attack him or something, but we showed the film to the miners and he didn't come to the screening. He was worried. Then after the screening, the miners came up to me. Some of them were saying, "Where's that guy? Where's the policeman? We want to shake his hand," because no one has ever said this ever before about the police. He was very brave to do that. We thought, really, you know, they were very happy and they thought he was kind of a good guy to do that. So that was interesting. So the worst police, I mean, the police behaviour was different between different forces. So the police from London were the worst behaved during the strike, because London has no emotional connection to industrial or mining history or families. And so they would come up and they would behave very badly, be very violent. They would beat people up and put little stickers on them. They'd smash up cars and put stickers on the cars saying who they were. They'd get lots of, you know, they'd get all the money they'd made and just push it in the faces of the miners because they were making so much money. They were buying houses and, you know, and cars and caravans with the overtime. They were making thousands of pounds. So they were very, very happy to do it. And they were kind of horrible people as well, a lot of them.
Talking about reconstructions and the milieu people who do it, it's in Poland we also do have it. It's a very active hobby or difficult. Actually, there was an interesting discussion happening between the Ministry of Sport and the Ministry of Culture. What is reconstruction and who should take care of it? Because administratively they do not know what it is, whether it's a sport or it's a cultural activity.
It's not sport.
But there's this Battle of Grunwald that happened in 1410 between the Polish-Lithuanian forces and the Teutonic Order, and this is reconstructed every year as a sort of big celebration showing middle finger to the Germans.
Of course.
It always has got this meaning.
That's the problem, isn't it, with reconstruction? You can almost rewrite history or just give your version of history. And I think, you know, there's always a political element to reconstruction, even though they say they're not political, they're not political. Obviously, my reconstruction was super political, because it was a battle where no one was killed. So it's not really a battle. Well, it is a battle, but it's not a traditional battle in terms of war. But yes, I can imagine there's a lot of nationalism around these things. In Britain, it's maybe a little less so, but maybe I'm not if I was from outside Britain, I'd say yes, it's very nationalistic, but I don't see it so much. But they're quite strange events. You'll see with this one, what happens at the end on this film is they do a walk through. It's kind of amazing, and they all walk past each other. You'll see it starts in a minute, and all the historical moments walk past each other, and they all salute each other. So you have Romans saluting Vikings, saluting Napoleonic, saluting Civil War, saluting First World Wars, and it's crazy. And then at the end, it's really but at the end they all go on the field and fight each other in different costumes. It's crazy. It's really crazy, and it's totally not allowed to do because it's so dangerous. They all have swords and guns and shit, and they're just fighting each other because they're all drunk or something. I don't know. But anyway, for me, it's an interesting culture, and also, I like working with people that other people might not want to work with sometimes, who seem to be not quite right. They're not politically correct, maybe, and some of these people are definitely not politically correct. If you go to these events sometimes, you see right on the edge, you see Germans dressed as Nazis walking around and stuff like that, because they're not allowed to do it in Germany, obviously, where they look, in these suits, they're just walking about happily being able to do it finally, And so there's a fringe element, actually, which are probably quite far right. Also, they're allowed to keep gunpowder, some of them, which is, the police are very interested in some of these people, because they're allowed to keep gunpowder, or black powder as it's called. So there's a fringe, I would say. But that's, for me also, I think it's interesting.
You also worked with another historical event, another battle, the Battle of the Somme, that was more recent. And the way you treated it was quite different in artistic form to the reconstruction of the Battle of Orgreave, right? Because there were individuals or small groups of soldiers dressed in the costumes from the time, and they were wandering around.
Yes, I should explain.
Did you? I find it a really beautiful project. I like it a lot. I was wondering if you hesitated around the Battle of Orgreave to do it in a different way, not just restaging, or it was obvious that it has to happen in this way.
Often when I have an idea, I have the idea, and then that's it. That's what it will be like. I don't change so much.
Okay.
I wish I had more ideas like that. I get like one every 2 years. I'd like to have maybe like 5 a year. But Orgreave was like, reconstruction, because it's a format everybody knows in Britain. The other thing I did was to celebrate, or to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme, which was a disaster for British troops in the First World War. I had about 1,500 people in full military costume appear around Britain in groups, in very busy places, and walk through shopping centres, be in very public areas, and just hang around the country for a day and then disappear. And that was last year I did that. And again, it's on a similar scale. It's thousands of people, a big piece of organisation. This was a big piece of organisation, this film.
Of course.
But it was paid for as a film, so it's interesting. If I had tried to get money as an artwork to make this, it would have been very difficult. But we had money from a film company to make it for TV. And also, when you say you're making something for TV, people just say, "Oh, okay." You say you're doing it as an artwork, but they say, "Well, why are you doing it as an artwork? What's the politics of it?" But if they think it's a documentary, you can get away with more. So it's very helpful.
You mentioned Brexit.
Yes.
And actually, Sheffield, Orgreave, all this area voted massively for Brexit, 62, 63%. You must have spent quite a lot of time with those people doing this reconstruction. Can you say that you are not amazed that you saw these problems at the time, more than 15 years ago, or?
Basically, the problem with what happened last year was people blamed everything on Europe. They became almost brainwashed by certain elements of the media to blame Europe for every problem, and Europe being the enemy of Britain, basically. And it's true, those people didn't really benefit from New Labour very well, but that wasn't Europe's fault. That was the political faults in the UK. So in a way, people were voting against successive governments. They weren't voting against Europe. And then, of course, we had this sort of migration debate as well. Which scared everyone. People were lied to massively, especially about Turkey. Turkey entering the EU. I was sent a map. I was sent a piece of election during Brexit. I was sent this document which said it was an official letter about Brexit, and it wasn't. It was like a piece of propaganda, and had a map of Europe, and it says Turkey will join the EU soon. So you have the map with Turkey, and then on the border of Turkey you had Syria and Iraq. I think it's Syria and Iraq. It's Iraq. And it was like saying, so that means Iraq and Syria are going to come into Europe. And it just said it like that. And
so at the time there was no Eurosceptical feelings.
There was a lot of anger.
Movements, anger. Okay.
There was anger, but you know you have to understand that there's newspapers in Britain that for 30 years or more, and they're quite powerful newspapers, have been attacking Europe, the Sun and the Daily Mail especially. And those newspapers, they're not just have influence on the public, they have influence on governments who are afraid of them. And so they will talk in a similar way because they think it will please those people from those newspapers. And so you have this circle of fear, basically, and attacking Europe for everything. And it's for a government, it's good to attack Europe because it takes the blame from them to over there to these strange people who speak a different language and eat, funny food or whatever. That's how it feels. And so there's a lot of lying going on. Our Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, bless him, he spent years as a correspondent in Brussels, and he just used to make up stories every Friday for a little column, like saying, the EU now wants your bananas to be straight, the carrots have to be this long. These rules he was saying the EU wanted. And I think most of them were lies, but they became part of the folklore about the EU, the straight banana, and the funny carrot, and this, and all these other stupid rules, but none of them are true. So he's been telling lies for like 30 years, and still is,
Yeah. The idea was that we talk for 30-40 minutes, then we open it to the audience. So as we do not have so much more time, I would like to still spend a little bit of it talking about more artistic matters.
Okay.
What I particularly like about your approach to art is how close it is, in my perception, to the original idea of the avant-garde. Is that you blur the division between what is art and what is everyday life. You do not keep them as separate domains. The fact that you work a lot with people who are vernacular artists, people who just create, the way Beuys thought about people, right? Everybody is an artist, everybody is creative. It's just that sometimes it's recognized in an institution, sometimes it's happening elsewhere. Would you consider yourself an avant-garde, post-avant-garde artist? Do you have any conscious relations to this project in terms of continuation, polemical continuation, or?
I like the idea that I'm avant-garde a lot. It sounds nice. But I don't know whether people would think, you think of me like this, which is good, but I think most people in the art world think avant-garde is something totally different. It's kind of really weird shit that you can't understand, basically. Whereas what I do is very understandable, very plain and clear, I would argue. It's almost populist, or popular. But avant-garde I prefer in a way, because it feels more revolutionary in a sense, more edgy. But I don't really think about my own definition in a way. I'm just lucky and happy that I can do these things. But you are deliberately and openly a political artist. You would not shy away from somebody describing your art as political and your attitude as political. Because some artists have this attitude that saying that the art is political is taking something from the artist. Art should be sublime and above mundane problems of politics, society, etc. So this is not your attitude, the way I understand it. But I'm not massively political. I'm not an activist. Some work I do is political, some is not at all. I do all sorts of things. This clearly is political artwork. I cannot deny that. It's all it is almost. So some things more than others. And interestingly, the work with the soldiers to do with the Somme became a political artwork because the work was the anniversary, which was by chance 1 week after the referendum vote. And I think people saw that work through the lens of the referendum, and I think people were very upset about the referendum in many ways because the politicians behaved so poorly. And when they saw these young men representing people that had died, I think it had a greater effect on them, I think, because that's real sacrifice, rather than sacrificing your country for an idea, really, which is what Brexit was, for this sort of strange idea. Yeah. Or you're sacrificing your country for your career as a politician. That's what really happened a lot with certain politicians.
With your political attitude, do you find it difficult to work with art institutions? You were on board of trustees of Tate Modern for years. You resigned. It ended in 2011. Was it linked with this BP stuff?
I got 4 years as a trustee.
Okay? So that was just
thing became bigger and bigger, and I got more angry by it in a way. I knew the people who were doing the actions or the performances. Yeah. But also I was on the inside, I was in the Tate, so I saw the pressure they were under, and I felt it was quite cynical, their targeting of the Tate.
Because all institutions, art in general, is involved in this kind of deals?
All sponsorship is a problem, I think. It can be a big problem. Also, they were being played by BP. The Tate were being played by BP, and they were... Basically, BP was subcontracting protest to the Tate. They were giving them money, and for that money, all the protest went to the Tate, it didn't go to BP. And so they were basically sucking, the Tate was taking all the shit. It wasn't BP that was taking the shit. And also, I don't think the public cares. If the public still put petrol in their car, they can't be upset by BP giving money to an art organisation.
I think it was about the spill in the Bay of America. No?
Yeah, that was a big thing, but it happened before that as well, and then afterwards. Yeah, I mean, that was a big, that's a terrible crime. Yeah. But you take money from Deutsche Bank. That's a kind of global crash They helped make that, as did most banks, insurance companies, investment houses, and so on. And those are the only people that give you money, are the people that have got some problem with their reputation almost. So I think it's tricky. It's not the problem with activists and like the BP thing. It's just black and white for them. Oil bad, art good. So no oil and art together can't work. It's really kind of simplistic. It's not quite like that. And so I just felt that they were really not. They don't attack. They don't go to the BP offices and do anything there. They just go to the Tate because it's easy and soft and liberal and get some publicity. The Guardian all the time. It's the Guardian. The Guardian do stuff about BP. Yeah. And the Guardian every week has a travel supplement that encourages people to get on planes.
It's a newspaper that really likes your art.
Yeah, but they like arts and they like controversy in art. And, they're on my. I'm like a Guardian reader's ideal artist in a sense sometimes, but I think they were complicit in this BP thing. So I don't know. I mean, it's more complicated than just this is a bad thing, I think.
Let's maybe open this talk for the audience. If you have questions, comments, maybe if you want to ask them in Polish and have a translation that I will very gladly translate. Jeżeli Państwo chcecie zapytać po polsku, to ja mogę oczywiście przetłumaczyć, nie ma żadnego problemu.
Should I stand up or stay? Okay. So in UK you have this peculiar concept of community art, which is about empowerment and grassroots creativity. So what's your relation with the actions community artists took during the miners' strike?
What they did? That's a good question. I mean, community art it has many kind of definitions in a way. But I think, culture can bring people together and can keep people together. And art can do that. And I think that was probably during the strike, it was a very important thing. There's a lot of culture around the strike, a lot of fundraising, a lot of events, a lot of musicians and comedians did a lot of work to raise money for the strike. But also a lot of artists went into communities and worked as a way of just keeping morale up. Community art in Britain is another thing as well. It's when people go into communities and make work with people and so on. I don't see myself as that in a way, because I'm not quite so. I think a lot of those artworks, at the end you have to fill in a form before you do it, and at the end of the form you have to say what the result will be of the work, even though you don't know, and how many people will be affected, and it's that sort of, it's almost like a government thing, instrumentalizing art. But I think the culture from the strike was very important, but what came out of it. In a way, this is a piece of community art in a sense, but it's a strange community. It's a community of reenactors and former miners. I don't, have I answered your question? A little bit.
More or less.
More or less.
Thank you.
Much better than nothing. Sorry. I think a lot of, can I just add something? I think a lot of community art now, or in the past and recently, has been made so at the end everyone feels very happy to be alive and happy with what they've done, and everyone shakes everyone's hands and hugs everyone. You know that kind of art? You know, it's like on TV now when they do makeover shows, and it's funny that TV now has taken over this sort of this kind of art that's been made where you go in somewhere and you do something with lots of people, like a choir, and they feel very happy at the end. With this work, as you see in the film, I didn't want to make people feel happy at the end. I wanted to make them actually feel a little bit angry of what had happened and what they'd seen or what they'd done, and make them think rather than just heal. Cathartic, you know, this idea of art can be cathartic. I was trying to make something that maybe wasn't cathartic, it was the opposite. I don't know what the opposite is of cathartic. That's what I was thinking. Your question?
Yeah, I have two actually, because first one is, has it ever occurred to you that your work can be interpreted with the Eisenstein October, because it was also reenacted in some way and it was a collective work. In fact, Eisenstein was only the leader of the collective. And the second is actually about my interpretation of your work, because I included it in my book, which is not out yet.
Okay.
So, and now you messed up unconsciously with my interpretation.
That's
so.
good.
Yeah. So basically, I interpreted the moment that you know that two groups approaching each other, and then you can see the police shields, and then you can see that the police group is seeing the reflection in the shields. So it is a kind of impression that they are confronting themselves.
That's a good point. Two questions. I'll do the first one. What is it? Eisenstein's film. What is it?
October.
Yeah.
Well, when I was researching this piece, I saw that after the Russian Revolution, they would reenact moments, great moments, stormings of winter palaces and so on for the public as a propaganda exercise, and I thought that was very interesting. And in a way, jousting, even, you know, reenactment is the same. You know, battle reenactment is a way to increase patriotism and morale. So, yes, but those were definitely very political reenactments, like my one. So, yes. And secondly, the thing about the shields and seeing themselves, the reflection in these perspex shields. There's a guy in the film, I don't know if you've noticed, you can't really hear his voice very well, but he's, just as the miners are about to push him, and he's the policeman, he says, I can't believe I'm fighting people like myself. These are men just like me, they have lives like me. It's a really profound moment in the film, maybe the most profound moment, but you can't really hear him say it, but it's a really great moment, so you are correct.
Yeah, this is actually the point of my interpretation, that you reinterpreted this as a class war. So, but then, before, just you said, the police group, like, how would you attribute, like, police in terms of class? Because you just said they earn a lot of money, and here in Poland it's not that. So I assumed that they are confronting each other because you somehow reinterpreted this conflict, which was like seemingly the conflict between authorities and those people, as a class war. So then you juxtapose them in a way that they are confronting themselves. You know, the same class of the society is confronting the same class of society. So they are fighting themselves. Something like that. So would you say it's incorrect now?
Well, I think it's a war on a class, on the industrial working class. Maybe I should say that. Whereas the police are like a service class, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah.
But you know, both the police, you know, miners were very well paid because they're very skilled, very dangerous jobs. They were the elite of the industrial working class. They made a lot of money, a lot of them, and they had good living, good lives. but they were still super working class, and they were just like I said, the elite. And the police were being paid more and more by Margaret Thatcher. She loved the police. She realised she needed them on her side, so she would always give them big pay rises and overtime. And most policemen are from working class backgrounds, but they're not industrial. You know, it's not an industrial thing. Obviously, it's a different kind of job.
But still working class.
Yes, but maybe with more aspirations to be not working class. So that's a classic Thatcherite, the aspiring lower middle class, or whatever you want to call it. So, yes, that's the class there, but also it's the political class against the...
So the class attribution would be basically the same?
Yeah, yeah, more or less.
There's one more thing, if I may. So I found the moment fascinating in your film, that you have the shield, like police shield, and then you have the edge. And the edge is like being pushed back and forward, and it moves like, you know, somehow, how you say, like this, to the imagined screen. Yeah, between the viewer and the actual scene. So it's something very interesting, because this is a screen which is in art history. It is interpreted as a point of mediation, negotiation between inside and outside. Here it's being pushed, like it's being negotiated.
Yes, I suppose it's like a membrane, isn't it? It's going to be like a good break.
Yes.
And then there'll be chaos or a mixture. Yeah, that was the thin. We call it the thin blue line in Britain, which is the police. You know, between. That's the thin blue line that separates us from chaos in a riot or something. So it's like a sentimental term for the police. But yeah, those shields were see-through. Again, they were very recent. Those shields were only in maybe 2 years old, so people hadn't seen those big, long shields before. They developed in Northern Ireland.
So what kind of shields are they?
Well, they're just perspex shields. What happened in Northern Ireland was they had shields that were like this. And then they realised that you can't protect your whole body, so people getting their feet, their legs hurt because they were protecting their body, but not their...
But still they were see-through, yeah?
They were see-through, so you could see what was happening. That was quite important. And they were light, for when you're chasing people.
Further questions or comments? Nobody?
Do you have a question? The last question?
I just wanted to comment on the class struggle as a sociologist. That it does not necessarily mean that individuals who face each other are from different classes. It means that the structural logic is the logic of class confrontation. Because obviously the police were in a different situation than the miners, because the miners were fighting for themselves, where police was hired by the state to confront the miners. So structurally it was a different situation. It was not a spontaneous confrontation of two groups or two people, two individuals. It was arranged via the state, state
and
machine.
So the class is fighting itself, in a way.
No, it's just people from one class are hired by another class to fight people from their own class.
Yeah.
That's,
That's
like
my point.
yeah, so they are not...
Yeah,
but it depends what do you mean who is fighting each other. If fighting means direct confrontation, this is true. But if fighting means a confrontation between two entities, the state and the miners, then definitely the state does not represent the class that miners belong to. It represents the propertied classes against the working class. So this is the logic of class confrontation in this situation. Not necessarily between individuals.
Yeah, of course.
That's, do you want to comment at the end, or maybe you have a question to the audience?
Not really. Just enjoy the exhibition. This is all in Polish, which is good. This part isn't. Some of it is. The film is really. I'm very happy with the film. It's quite long though. It's like an hour, so you might want to come back and watch it. And it's subtitled. But it's sort of interesting when you see that the reenactors, this is the interesting subplot for the film, the reenactors, the guys who dress up as Napoleonic troops or Civil War troops, are terrified of the miners. There's 200 miners in the reenactment, 800 reenactors basically. And the 800 reenactors are terrified that the 200 miners are going to beat them all up and start a revolution. Some of them are. They literally, you can tell they're very worried that this will end up in a real battle, a real riot. And what was brilliant about the performance was that the miners gave so much emotion in their performance, in their reenactment or their reliving, that it really terrified the reenactors. They'd never seen emotion in a battle. Because of course you can't get emotional about a 500-year-old battle. You do it as a technical thing. And so when they saw men being very upset and real anger and real emotion, it really affected them massively. And it was very interesting for them. I think they learned something from it, I think. Some of them did.
Okay, Jeremy, thanks a lot, and thank you for showing in such a huge number, and enjoy the exhibition. Thank you.
Thank you.